All right, this is Brian Johnson with Finance and Commerce, and I'm pleased to be joined by Delma Palma, who recently joined LSE Architects of Minneapolis as Principal and Market Leader for Housing and Private Development. Delma is the first external principal invited to join LSE. She brings more than a decade of architectural and urban design experience across public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Most recently, she helped lead the design vision for major real estate development projects across New York State with Empire State Development. In her new role, Delma will lead the housing and private development market at LSE. She works closely with teams across the firm to strengthen client relationships, shape new opportunities, and advance design excellence in affordable, senior, and mixed-use housing projects locally and nationally. So, Delma, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So, how long have you been with LSE? Are you just hitting the ground running now?
Yeah, a little bit over a month. And I moved to the Twin Cities area a little bit longer than that a couple months ago. And so I'm really, drinking from a fire hose, learning as much as possible these past couple of months, but really liking what I'm seeing so far.
So are you a newcomer to the Twin Cities?
I am. I mean, I've been here many times before because my husband is from the area, and his family is here. And one of the reasons that brought us back. And then I went to school at Notre Dame, so I'm familiar with the Midwest, and actually visited Minneapolis and St. Paul when I was at school too.
How are you enjoying our winter weather so far?
I mean, so far it has been lovely to look at. A little bit scarier to drive in, but
Hmm.
I am getting. I'm remember. It's all coming back to me from when I was in South Bend, and I'm adequately clothed. I got the right boots now, so I think I'm ready for the winter.
Excellent. Well, that always helps. So yeah, just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your new role with LSE and what are some of your specific job duties?
Sure. Yeah. So, before committing to LSE, I had quite a few conversations with Mohammed to make sure it was the right fit. Both me coming from a new market or to a new market and LSE's first time hiring external leadership. It was a pretty big step. So we tried to be intentional and transparent about what our goals were for the future of LSE specific to housing. And so LSE is seen as a trusted partner in the communities that they serve with this like high cultural competency, right? And this entrepreneurial spirit. And so those are things that attracted me to the firm and I think are key to the potential for growth in the firm. So they have experience with institutions like communities, schools, libraries. And so housing is a critical need for every community across the country. And so, really, with their knowledge, their network, and my experience, I think the opportunity to expand the housing portfolio is a clear strategic move. And that's what I'm going to be focused on.
And tell us a little bit more about your background in architecture. I just gave a brief introduction there, but you've done a lot of exciting things throughout the
Yeah, I've
country,
been
it sounds like.
to a few different places. Yeah, I grew up in Southern Florida. My parents are Honduran immigrants, and as I mentioned, I went to school at Notre Dame where I met my husband, and then started my professional career in Washington D.C. at a architecture and planning firm working on housing nationally. And then I actually developed this interest in being on the owner side of development projects. So I applied to a fellowship called the Rose Architectural Fellowship that places or placed architects in ownership roles. So whether that was at community development corporations or housing agencies in urban to rural environments all around the country. And I got the fellowship, and that's what took me to New York. So I was with the fellowship for 2 years, and then they asked me to stay on permanently. And I did at the New York City Housing Authority, and I started their Connected Communities program, which is their urban design program. So NYCHA, for short, they have 2,400 acres of open space in the middle of New York City, which is not something you usually think about. in New York. But all of this open space, they had very little strategic direction for it. So we created this program that helped establish design guidelines, pilot different types of projects, establish partnerships, and really fundraise around the open space because NYCHA has an $80 billion capital deficit. So fundraising was key. We did a master plan for over 130 sites. And then we put that all online so that residents, elected officials, and people from the community would really be empowered to improve their neighborhood through these resources. And then after my stint at NYCHA, I went to the state's economic development corporation called Empire State Development. And there I worked on more housing and incentivizing it from the state side. So whether that was through overriding local zoning, providing tax incentives, or actually providing the land for housing projects. One of a very cool project that I worked on before I came over was 60 acres in Queens, a former psychiatric center that we were redeveloping into over 1,200 units of housing and a school, 6 acres of open space, lots of childcare centers, a senior center. And we were also trying to do a net zero master plan as well, so to make sure we're meeting the state's decarbonization goals. So housing and the public realm, urban design, have really always been at the heart of the work that I've done.
And how long were you in New York?
I was in New York 8 years.
Okay.
Mhm.
So when you compare that with Minneapolis, what do you see do you see a lot of similarities there in terms of opportunities and challenges in affordable housing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the scale might be different, but the challenges are very similar. I think they sort of fall into different buckets, right? There's the regulatory challenges, the financing, and then the construction costs. And I think we in New York and across the cities, I think we've seen people start to tackle the regulatory obstacles. So New York passed the City of Yes, which was a huge comprehensive rezoning effort expected to bring 80,000 units in 15 years. We've seen elimination of single family zoning, the parking minimums, that sort of stuff. But I haven't seen as much innovation and attention, I think, put on the financing and construction side of things. And I think that could be a kind of a potential area for improvement. I think post construction or post COVID construction costs are so high, so dramatically increased. And I think we've all learned to live in that new environment. But I was working on a project in New York that the construction cost was, over $1 million a unit. And that's just not a sustainable way to build ourselves out of this housing crisis. And so I think there has to be some thought put into that. Prefab, manufactured, modular housing, all these things have been around for a while, but I think
Hmm.
they're getting more traction now.
Hmm.
And but the risk of them just not being business as usual is still there. So I think government needs to kind of step in and provide maybe more consistent demand for this type of construction so that that sector can be built up and kind of scaled. And then another item I think is pretty fascinating is like, how can AI improve that industry as well? I was at a conference and I heard a contractor speaking on how they were using AI to improve site safety on the construction site. How they could analyze all these different things, the weather, how many people were on the site, how behind schedule they were, and they could actually anticipate safety issues coming up and go and deal with those in the moment. And that can really, lower costs related to injury, the construction delays, or litigation. So I think there's a lot of potential there. As for the funding, I think, brighter minds than mine are thinking of things in that space, but where I have seen it intersect well with design is in the decarbonization of housing. And so by designing buildings that use very little energy and are potentially covered by renewable energy, I think, you have the potential to see decreased operating costs, decreased capital repair costs, and insurance costs, especially if that's taking into consideration climate risk. So that's one of the reasons when I was in New York, we were pursuing passive house for as many projects as we could, and we weren't seeing too bad of an increase in construction costs.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, in the press release announcing that you're joining LSE, you mentioned that housing has become a defining challenge for communities across the country, and touched on the importance of having a nimble architect who can innovate within that housing landscape. I thought that was kind of an interesting observation. Can you expand on that a little bit and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the regulations are constantly changing, right? Not just at the federal level, but everybody's trying to figure the housing problem out. And so I think having an architect that is not just trusted by the community, but also really nimble at meeting client demands and addressing the regulatory environment and being creative in their approach is going to be increasingly more important as projects become more complicated, as space becomes more limited, or we're looking at more innovative construction solutions. So that capacity, I think, is becoming really important in the designer and architecture team.
And I know you haven't been with LSE for long. What you said, about a month now. But
A
what
little
are
over, yeah.
yeah, what are some of the specific things? Can you talk about any specific projects you're working on, or you're just kind of are you still trying to just get used to the lay of the landscape here, or
Yeah, well, I'm doing a lot of listening, familiarizing myself with the local regulations and financing and what the
Mhm.
landscape of housing people here look like. So, I mean, LSE has this ethos and goal of like really listening to communities, right? And so I'm trying to take that same approach in coming into the housing world here. But I mean, there are a lot of things I'm really excited about that I'm seeing at LSE. I'm also excited to expand their urban design, urban planning portfolio because I have a lot of experience in that. I mean, we just got financing for a project in Rochester with that Mayo Clinic's master plan. So shout out to Aon, we're doing that with them. And a few confidential things that I'm pretty pumped about. So yes, definitely more to come in the coming months and years.
Yeah, it sounds like you already have a lot on your plate, so you expect to stay busy in 2026 and beyond with various projects.
Definitely, yeah.
So, yeah, we've covered a lot of ground here, Delma, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but are there any other thoughts you'd like to share before I let you go?
Well, I just want to speak maybe a little bit to my experience on public-private partnerships and how I think that is going to be super relevant in the coming years in the housing landscape too, especially with the shifting regulatory, environment. I think that figuring out how the public sector and the private sector can really work together on planning that meets the market needs, that meets the community needs, and having that translated through design in a successful way is going to be critical. And trusting each other to do this together as a community, right? When money was cheap, I think housing developments could be a little bit more transactional, but now it's complicated, and we need to trust each other and work together to meet the goals of the moment.
Well, great. Well, good luck with that and with all of your endeavors. And thank you again for joining me. I appreciate it. And have a good holiday season and a happy New Year.
Oh, thank you. You as well.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.